folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is a live edition of the Jake Feinberg Show, coming to you on Power Talk. Please go to our website, powertalk.live. Download our free app to your smartphone so you can stream all of our live local programming, including Solomon on Blast, the Jim Parisi Show, and yours truly, the Jake Feinberg Show. We can't thank you enough for making us part of your day today. It's been a pretty cosmic year. It's been a great last 9 years. This will be 9 years come January 2020 that I've been on the radio, and I've interviewed over 1,500 cats from all different styles of music from all different parts of the world. But if there were two people that I know I was touched by the divine, it would be a couple of guys from the New England area who were born well before I was ever birthed, but they knew each other as boyhood comrades in music and in life, and their careers took on these really similar, interesting, parallel tracks. They both wound up moving to the West Coast and becoming prolific. In one case, percussionist, in the other case, drummer in the studios as mentors, teachers, getting the memo about being real human beings and living life to the fullest and enjoying life, recognizing that we only go around on this earth one time. And the two times that, well, suffice it to say, they lift spirits all over the world. And we lost one of them last week. I don't think it's really a tragedy, because the way I look at it is he lived a completely hearty existence and did everything he probably wanted to do and saw everything he ever wanted to see and played every kind of music he wanted to play. And I thought it only appropriate with the passing of Emil Richards that I bring on arguably his best friend and one of his comrades, and a guy who's still playing to the heavens and hopefully will be for some time to come. Merry Christmas. Joe Porcaro, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you. Glad to be of service and to be able to talk with you today.
It is an absolute honor to talk to you, man. I just wanted to talk to you. It's so interesting. I mean, at 41, I have two children, and I noticed that younger generations were so protective, and rightfully so. I mean, we love our kids. But, families, when you were growing up, were, like, huge. I mean, in some cases, they were, like, 8 or 10. I remember interviewing Wilton Felder, and he had 15 sisters, brothers and sisters. And he was like,
right.
And he was like, I was asking him about that, and he goes, a couple of them died before I was even born. And so, I mean, having the perspective of life, being that you were very close with Emil, I mean, has your view on, I don't know what the right word is, on people passing away, on death, I mean, did you guys take it? The life expectancy wasn't that long when you guys were growing up in Connecticut. I mean, people, if you lived to 50, you had a good life. And now it just goes, and I want to get your perspective on, like, I feel like Emil, I mean, the guy was such a peaceful warrior, but, I mean, he lived a great life. I mean, there's no regrets here, right? I mean, and how does your view of death, has it changed over time? And because I just know families used to be much bigger and people used to pass away a lot more, when you guys were coming up. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I came, from the east side of Hartford, Connecticut, and like my teacher, Al Lepak, he had 11 children. A lot of families had, 8, 10. I remember hearing some families had 15 children, like you said a minute ago. They had big families, especially Catholics, the church, that was it.
You didn't practice any. There was
a lot of them, practiced by the church. Catholicism. I remember on Front Street, most of the families, they were big. 5, 8, and so on.
So do you have all I'm saying is, like, it just seems like, when you look back at Emil, I mean, do you have memories that go back? I mean, you told me that great story about where he would play Flight of the Bumblebee. He'd do these, like, big, I don't know, presentations, artistic presentations for you guys when you were younger. But what is Emil's legacy to American music in your mind?
Well, first of all, I can remember I met Emil. I was born in New Britain, Connecticut, which was about 15 miles away from Hartford. And in 1940, I moved to Hartford. And I remember, going to school, transferring, to elementary school. And I remember in the schoolyard, I met Emil in school. And I remember exactly what he was wearing. He was 8 years old, I was 10 years old. I can remember the outfit he was wearing. And then, we went to the same Catholic church. We went to catechism on Saturday together. We went to choir together. We went to church together. I grew up with Emil. I've known him. Because I met him in 1940.
1940.
Yeah, wow. I met Emil in 1940. And I used to, we met, we started hanging out together after school. Like I told you, I'd go up to his house and he was, his father was pretty strict. He had to go home after school, practicing marimba, playing, the Flight of the Bumblebee and, different legit pieces on the marimba. He was amazing, even at that age. And then, as we grew up, we went to catechism one day. I don't know if I told you the story.
Go ahead.
I don't want to repeat myself, but...
no, I will let you know if you repeat anything, but go ahead. Go ahead.
But every Friday we had CYO dances, Catholic Youth Organization. And, our church had its own hall. And, we danced with a Victrola. That's all we had. No band or orchestra or anything like that. And one day in catechism, our priest, Father Toscano, he was a piano player also. And he wanted to form a band. So he asked, raise our hands, who played an instrument. And Emil and I were the only ones that raised our hand. Emil raised his hand, I raised my hand, and the Father says to Emil, what do you play? He says, xylophone. He says, great. And he looked at me, he said, what do you play? I said, drums. But I don't own a drum set. I don't have a drum set. But at that church, me and my brothers, we played in the drum and bugle corps. I was 10 years old, marching on Memorial Day with those field drums, me and my two brothers. So I told the priest, I said, I think we could put together a drum set with the drums we have in the drum corps, Scotch bass drum. I said, but we need a foot pedal, we need spurs so the bass drum won't roll over. My father was a snare drum player. He played snare drum in an Italian symphonic band. And I used his snare drum. And the priest, bought me we didn't have any hi-hats in those days. The priest bought me a snare drum stand. And he bought me an old Ludwig foot pedal with a big cotton beater. And we used a cymbal. We bought a cymbal stand, and we used a cymbal from the drum corps. And that was my drum set.
Holy cow.
And he and Emil and I, every Friday, we played for CYO dances, but all we played was polkas and mazurkas all night long. We didn't know any foxtrots or anything like that.
Oh, my gosh, this is incredible.
Had a ball. And then, as we grow up, my brother, got out of the Army, and he took me to a music store and helped buy me a Leedy drum set. And Emil and I, we had in the neighborhood, we had a great guitar player, Al Guerrera. He played guitar, and we had a bass player who worked at a, Italian market. He was a meat cutter, and Al Franco, and he played bass, and Emil and I, and we had a quartet.
Unbelievable.
And we were playing for, Italian weddings and stuff like that as we grew up, you know. And then, high school, Emil went to New York and started studying with Terry Gibbs, the great vibe player, and we kind of, right after that, we kind of separated. I joined a union, started doing some union gigs, and Emil didn't want to join the union at that time, so we kind of separated for a few years. And then later on, around college days, I didn't go to college, but Emil did, but we formed a jazz quartet with this great piano player, blind piano player, Dave Mackay, and a bass player from the music, the Hart School of Music there, Ortiz Walton, Emil and I, and we had a really nice quartet. And then, the Korean War broke out, and Emil, went to West Point to audition for the West Point band, and he was too short because the only opening they had was a bass. And ended up in, Korea, with the Army band. And I was 4F. I went, when I filled out my questionnaire, I went to the Hartford. Instead of going to the draft board, they made me go to the Hartford Hospital. And I had asthma really bad in those days, and the doctor says, no way, you're 4F. So Emil, went to Korea, and meanwhile I was playing around town, jazz clubs and this and that and casuals. And then Emil came home, and he went to New York and moved to New York. And then he heard about the opening with George Shearing, went and auditioned for that, and he got the gig with George Shearing and went on the road, with George Shearing. So Emil was gone for a while, and then while he was on the road with George Shearing, they came to California, and Emil started hanging around with Shelly Manne while he was in California with George Shearing, and one thing led to another, and he started going on studio gigs with Shelly, and he says, this is it, this is for me. And he stayed, left Shearing and stayed in California, and went back home after and got his wife and 2 kids and moved them to California. And it was, 10 years later, well, before that, Emil came home one year. I was playing I was the house drummer at a jazz club in Hartford, and we were playing with Donald Byrd one night, and Emil came home, and he came by, and we, during intermission, we got talking, and he says, why don't you come out and visit me to California, check things out? He says, I think you would do well out there. Because I, went as far as I could. I played in the Hartford Symphony at that time and playing in this jazz club. And, my teacher, Al Lepak, he was the big gun, the number one guy. And one day I was doing a Broadway show. The casual band leader I worked for, he was a contractor, and he contracted, they premiered, there was a summer theater in Connecticut by the ocean. I forgot the name. Goodspeed Opera House. Mm-hmm. And they were premiering Man of La Mancha, the Broadway show. And the casual contractor hired me to play drums and percussion for that. So I, did that. And one day, then it was a whole summer gig. And after Man of La Mancha left, which was a great show, and they started doing like, these old-fashioned operatic, plays, and it was very, very boring. So one day, Emil came home when I was doing that jazz club, and he says, again, I think I told you this already. He said, why don't you come into California, spend a week with me, and check things out? So during a matinee one day at the Goodspeed Opera House, I went to a phone call. I couldn't handle that kind of music anymore. I went to the phone and called Emil up, and I lucked out. He was home. And I told him I'd like to come and visit him, what we had talked about. And I went out, visited him for a week, and I went around every morning, 8 o'clock in the morning on the road, going to Paramount Studios, MGM, all the studios, and I just was awed by it all. I couldn't believe. He'd work all day on a movie. At night, he'd go to Capitol Records and record with Sinatra, and so on. The whole week, I was just flabbergasted. TV shows, jingles, one after another. So after the week was over, Emil says, well, what do you think? You want to come out? I says, yeah, I think I can handle this, this kind of, music and playing, I felt with all the experience I had, playing in the symphony and, all kinds of music, I thought I could, I could do it. So I says, give me a year. I want to brush up. I had to really, get busy with my mallet work. So I waited a year, and after a year, I grabbed my wife and 4 kids and put them in my station wagon. We drove to California, and that's how it all ended up. And soon as I got to California, looked Emil up and, joined the union like he said and went through all of that. And right away I joined an answering service and started getting, phone calls to sub and this and that. But anyways, that's how it worked out. And then after I moved to California, about, 3 months or so in, Emil went to India for a whole year to study meditation. Emil was really into that, and he took a whole year off. And then when he got back, he did his first album, Odd Meter album, and he hired me to do that with him. And the rest is history. He's formed a band, and
let me ask you a question.
We made a couple of 2 or 3 albums. We got involved with Roger Calloway and, started making albums with Roger, and that's how it went down.
Joe, you mentioned this quartet with a bassist, I think Mackay on piano, and then there was a bass player. But do you know, from a touring point of view, or just a live gigging point of view, what was the longest period of time that you and Emil played live together? Was it actually? Because you guys were in the studios basically. Once you guys went to L.A., Emil obviously went out with Sinatra. You might have toured with Mulligan or other people, but what was the longest period of time that you guys actually were on the bandstand playing live together? And can you talk about? We led in with. It was before I actually got to meet you personally, but Emil got me into the Bogey show for I think his 88th. I don't know what birthday it was, but you guys have been playing for 78 years. This was back in a couple years ago, and that was you guys on the bandstand. It was so beautiful to watch the telepathy. And I just, maybe more than anything else, I just wanted you to talk about the telepathic nature of rhythm. And once you start playing with somebody like Emil, you go back so far, the rudiments are so there, and how that magic takes over and that telepathy takes over in your music.
Well, what happened is when I moved to L.A., Don Ellis, this trumpet player, he formed a Hindustani quintet. It was all odd meters, right. Playing in 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, 15, 19, you name it. And Emil was gone. Well, the first thing that happened with me is playing with Emil in L.A. is when I got here, he was asked to do an album. And when he, heard that I was in town, and, of course, we met, we hung out together. He called me up and says, look, I got to do this. I'm doing this album, and I want you to do it with me. And it was odd meters, right away I got nervous, odd meters, but like I said, I had plenty experience playing odd meters, I used to, before I moved to California, when I was playing in nightclubs in Hartford, I played for belly dancers, and, these girls were incredible with odd meters, when they're dancing and doing their routine, they have those finger symbols in their hands, and they play in 5 and 7/8 and 9/8 and so on. Boy, if I ever missed a beat, they would get very upset. And I was fortunate. The bass player in the band was an expert. He was really on top of all that stuff. So, and between that and my experience playing, in the Hartford Symphony, playing odd meters, with Bartok and Stravinsky, I kind of, fell into that right away. So I had plenty of experience. So when I went out and, to L.A. and Emil hired me to play and Dave Mackay, the blind piano player, was on the band from our original band. He was in California. He had moved there also. And he wrote a beautiful tune in 5 called Here. And, I fell into it right away. But, all I can say is, things just worked out for me with Emil right away. So that, he realized I was into the same, kind of odd meter stuff he was into.
Did you?
We right into it. So he formed a band with Dave, the blind piano player, myself, and Chuck Delmonico, and we started playing around L.A., around the Valley, clubs. Dante's, a famous jazz club. And that did me a lot of good, because, all these great musicians come in and check out what was going on. So I met a lot of people, and, it helped me with my career in the studios and everything. But it was all Emil's doing, But he, we had that band together for quite a while. It was just when you met us, at bogies and places like that, we had kind of separated from Dave, the blind piano player, Dave Mackay. He kind of went off with his own thing, and we went another way. So, but, that was it. We started that quartet, and then we got involved with Roger Calloway. The group was called the Roger Calloway Cello Quartet. And, he formed a whole new band, and, with Emil, myself on drums, Chuck Delmonico again on bass, and Roger on piano, and then Ed Lusgarten, this incredible cello player, we met in the studios. And that was a very demanding, band. I mean, Roger Calloway and but Emil.
No, I want to ask you a question though, Joe. Joe, we're going to get better. We're getting better all the time. But I want you to talk about, when I look at your list of credits, like, you were not a bebop purist. I'm just curious about how your philosophy as it related to when rock music took over? Because I find you on rock albums as much as jazz albums, and some people that were. I just remember Larry Klein, the great bass player, told me that when he was going out with Freddie Hubbard live, you could tell there were people that were, bebop purists that were looking at him like, oh, you're not playing the real stuff, And they were playing more like sort of, I don't know what the right word is. It was a combination of rock and jazz and blues. But, I mean, you had this experience playing all this Arabic music in these belly dancer clubs. You were playing with Mike Mainieri. You're playing jazz, Jerry Mulligan. But then you're also, do you remember what it was like when rock music came in and how you felt about it?
Well, you have to remember, I had, I was, it started off with me playing, with, when you're playing in a casual band, where you're playing for bar mitzvahs, weddings, and whatever, you have to play all kinds of music. So when rock came out, of course, these casual bands, we listened to the Beatles or whoever, but at that time, when rock first came out, for me, it was the Beatles, and I had three sons that were, and the oldest one, Jeffrey, who was a great drummer and did very well for himself, until he passed on. But, he would play Beatles day and night as a kid. He started... and it's a mixture, right? African American. Every apartment, there were 4 apartments in every building, and the Hartford Housing Authority made sure that there would be a Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, and African American family in each building.
Really? That's fantastic. Yes. That's amazing. Yes. Holy! Continue, please.
Hartford Housing Authority, Bowles Park in Hartford, Connecticut. And we, after school, now this is like, my son Jeff and the kids are Jeff was about 10 years old or so, 8, after school. And every building had a big cellar, humongous cellar. And the kids used to go down there, and I remember when Chubby Checker, first came out.
Right.
And all the kids used to hang down the cellar. We had a Victrola down there, and they're dancing the Chubby Checker. And go downstairs one day, and I'm watching them, and they're having a ball, man. But it's Chubby Checker, whatever. All these rhythm and blues bands that were out in those days. And those kids, Jeffrey grew up on that stuff, man, between that and the Beatles. And then he started, all of a sudden, he's at my drums, and I'm saying, wait a minute, this kid has got it, and he's playing away. So, I started giving him a few lessons, and then we moved to California. Meanwhile, Mike, our other son, he started playing guitar, and from that he went to bass, and Steve, started piano lessons. And before you know it, that's how my gang started. We moved to California, and we're in Burbank, we had a garage, and, in school now, it's junior high school, and Jeff is coming home with these cats, they're in the garage, and I'm saying, wow, and he's playing the Beatle records all, after school like crazy, and I got to high school, and I'm taking him all over town on Saturday. He's playing legit stuff, but he's taking legit lessons. And Grant High School and Valley, North Hollywood here in California, They had an incredible teacher and musicians that graduated there. Tom Scott and Alan S. and all these great musicians. And an incredible drummer, Steve Bohannon. He was the original drummer with Don Ellis, with Emil. I mean, it was just an incredible era. And, Jeffrey came in right after those guys left, but they left a legacy where, they the whole school was involved in music and rock and roll music at the time, the Beatles and you name it, James Brown, all that. I was taking Jeffrey all over the place, and Mike and Steve.
Were you?
So that's how all that started. These kids just.
I mean, basically, you were.
With me, I my whole thing goes all the way back to Hartford, where I was the house drummer at this, hotel nightclub. They had every Monday night they would bring up artists from New York, and I lucked out that I had this. My whole thing was Charlie Parker, Max Roach, and that era.
Mm-hmm.
And I developed a reputation around Hartford as a, bebop drummer. And, once I heard Max Roach, man, I fell in love with his playing. So I wanted to be a jazz drummer, big band, drummer on the road and all that. That was my ambition. I did the legit stuff to make a living. Because what can you make? How good of a living can you make trying to be a jazz drummer in Hartford, Connecticut? Developed a decent reputation, and Monday nights Donald Byrd came up. I played with him. I played with Jackie Byard. All these great musicians. What's his name? Al Cohen, Bob Brookmeyer. I mean, you name it. All the guys that were hip in those days, I was playing with them.
That's
rock, or beside the symphony, my whole thing was pay attention. When I played with the symphony, I made sure I played the music legit, like you're supposed to. But I had a natural talent for jazz drumming, especially bebop, and I started making a name for myself around Hartford. I was playing in the black clubs up the North End. The guys used to hire me up at the North End. I had a 4-night a week a gig at a black nightclub.
What was the?
Really my thing. What's going on?
Did you play with like T-Bone Walker and those cats?
No, not any
blues.
Rhythm and blues.
No,
my whole thing.
Yeah.
I played with Bob Brookmeyer and Al Cohen and Dave McKenna, people like that. I was the house drummer.
No, I did, but I mean the Black Club.
And like Byard said, man, why don't you come to New York? I had all kind of offers to move. So my thing in my heart, man, my thing was bebop. So when I moved to New York, to California,
right?
One of the very first gigs I had was at Shelly's Manhole. Shelly Manne, right? The drummer.
I'm still trying to get to his wife. She's still alive. Yeah, I love her. Keltner's trying.
Flip.
Yeah, I gotta talk to her.
She's still around.
Yeah,
man.
I know
she used to come when Emil and I were playing at these clubs. But she hasn't been around lately, but I don't know. But she's still happening. But anyways, Dave McKay, that blind piano player I told you about, he Chet Baker came in town to play at Shelly's Manhole, and he hired Dave, and he told Dave McKay, I need a drummer, so Dave recommended me. So I played a whole week at Shelly's Manhole. I had just moved out to L.A.
Oh, this is great.
Well, this was maybe a year later, and I played at Shelly's. And, Shelly Manne always played intermission when groups came into his club. His band would play first. He had a quintet. And he did that because he wanted to keep his chops up.
Absolutely.
So I went in there with Chet Baker, and one night we're in the musician's room, and I'm sitting down, and he comes over to me, and he says, geez, I understand Dave Mackay tells me you're a percussionist too, and this and that. And I said, yeah. He says, wow. He says, he says, I like the way you play too. So he says, I have a TV show. You're going to hear from me. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, I got a call to do he had a TV show called Doc Tari. It was kind of a comedy about African.
Totally. There was records put out. It was
a pretty popular show.
Sure, totally.
And I did that a couple of times for him, and one thing led to another, and he recommended me to the biggest contractor in town, and between him and Emil, I was on my way as a studio player.
Well, you have the most incredible time field, Joe. I mean, it's just like hypnotic stuff. We have a game on this program called Name That Voice. I'm going to put this in for you right now, and listen to it, and we'll come back and break it down.
Frank asked, we were really all working toward getting John Kennedy elected as president, and we did a commercial called High Hopes, that we had high hopes for Jack Kennedy to become our president. And as soon as he became president, President Kennedy asked Frank if he would do a world tour for underprivileged children and found hospitals wherever we went. And Frank says, well, under the auspices of the State Department. And Frank says, I'll do one better. I'll pay for it myself. I got my own jet, and I'll just go around and so you tell me which countries you want to go. And President Kennedy said, okay, well, then we'll have the ambassador of each country meet you, get you through customs and all that. So that's when I started collecting instruments. We didn't have to worry about customs, so I was able to I filled the belly of Frank's plane with ethnic percussion instruments from around the world. That was my beginning of collecting instruments.
All right, let's just break this down. Let's break it down for 1 second.
You recognize that voice?
Yeah, that's Emil.
That was from my interview with him way back May 31st, 2011. Joe, that's how long I've been doing my show for. And Emil was one of my first guests, and he was a total beacon of light. And my question really is, for you, did you, because obviously he was coming back with all sorts of different ethnic percussion, and you played a lot of percussion. I mean, you played a lot of different percussion, but he had when he passed, he had over 750 or 800 percussive instruments in his it's remarkable how much. I mean, to me, that's part of his legacy, is just this insatiable desire to find new instruments that create different rhythms and fit into different contexts, or take different types of ethnic percussion and put it into a jazz context. And I'm not saying you were as fascinated with that stuff as he was, but I mean, it was pretty. Where were you at when he was doing those Kennedy tours? Were you already out in California? I'm sorry, the Sinatra tours.
No, I was. Yeah, but Emil's thing was sounds.
Sounds.
Composers were looking for different sounds to impress the producers. Right. In these movies and TV shows. That's what the whole thing with Emil was. But no, I didn't go. Emil was, in California 10 years ahead of me. But just when I couldn't have timed it better. Just when I moved out to California, the producers of these TV shows, movies, they wanted new sounds, new rhythms, and so on. And then rock was coming into the scene, and they wanted some of this, rhythms that were coming from, the rock drummers and the rock groups in general.
Right.
Because the rock groups, they were, when I remember when, going in doing sessions on percussion, where, the producers were looking for kind of new sounds and rhythm, like Al Blaine, or Earl Palmer would, play on a drum pad instead of a drum, or the seat, his drum stool, just to, create a different sound and so on.
Wow.
So that was happening in the studios and, on record dates. So, that's what was happening there. Everybody was looking for a new way to impress with sounds. I'm talking about sounds. So, Emil went all over and came home with all these new sounds and, Indian instruments and so on. And some were handmade. There was an instrument, Emil, that was very popular with Lalo Schifrin. And then he met Harry Parch.
Yes.
A composer who invented all these, I don't know if you know the name Harry Parch.
I've done a lot. No, I know him very well.
That invented all these different, microtonal pitches, like the xylophone bars, the marimba bars, and so on, all the pitches, all these metal instruments, like wind chimes and stuff like that. They were tuned, bells and stuff like that, they were tuned microtonally, so created a whole new sounds. And that's what the composers were looking for, stuff like that. So that's right away, that made Emil so popular with the composers, And then he put out a book. So right away, the first guy they looked at immediately was Emil. And I lucked out I was a friend of Emil, so he, and then, excuse me.
Sure.
Emil used to, warehouse. We had a big warehouse. And Emil had all the instruments there. And Emil would, put together rehearsals. And he had some of Harry Parch's music, and we would play it. And he would invite, composers there to listen. And, right away, who would they hire? Of course, Emil,
Right. He's the only person.
Emil really made out. Besides being hired, he rented the instruments. So Emil made a lot of money, with renting all those instruments.
This is so fascinating because I know when one of my interviews with Emil, he talked about working with Don Lemon, Shelly Manne, and with the unions because percussionists would never get double scale. For tablas or for chimes or marimba or vibes. He actually advocated with those guys in the late 50s, early 60s in LA to make sure that you guys got double scale. If you played, because if you play saxophone, if you play different wind instruments on an album, if you play sax and flute, you get double scale. And that was not the case for percussionists and drummers back then. And Emil made the case that, hey, it takes a lifetime to learn how to play tablas. It takes a lifetime to learn how to play vibes or anything like that. And that was striking to me. And he was always just so measured. But I want to go back to this whole thing about telepathy, Joe. It's the magic of music. You start to play, and all of a sudden, you guys are like thinking you're like a hand in glove. And that magic is so hard today to keep bands together I mean, frankly, with the cost of living, it's hard enough to just keep a band together and sing for your supper without doing stuff outside of music. And you guys were so lucky to not just get ahead, but really have wonderful livelihoods doing what you loved. And the coolest thing about you and Emil is that you develop that, you just get to a point where your consciousness is so locked in together, and you raise the vibration together, and there's a telepathic thing that goes on. And I just wanted you to, if you could articulate and talk about almost reading each other's minds when you guys were so in sync. To me, that's the magic of music.
Well, I want to backtrack a little bit. Emil and I were doing a session with Lalo Schifrin. Emil was, one of Lalo's first call musicians. Before I talk about that,
Go ahead.
please try to remember what I was going to say about Emil and Lalo Schifrin.
I will, yeah.
What happened with, you mentioned musicians getting double scale.
Yeah.
Well, some guys got double scale, like my son Jeff on a lot of sessions without even asking for it. He was paid double scale, especially Japanese people that came over. Sometimes he would get triple scale because they wanted him so bad. But so things like that happened. But going back when you said Emil, about getting double scale, what happened was they don't get double scale. They're called doubles, like when a woodwind player goes on a session and he has to play, he gets hired to play saxophone, alto saxophone. Well, in the music, if he has to go to flute, bass flute, or oboe, instruments like that, woodwind instruments like that, the first extra instrument he touches, like if he's playing saxophone and they want him to play flute, the music all of a sudden says flute, he gets 50% more on his pay. And then for every other instrument he touches, he gets 25.
That's what it was.
So he could end up getting double scale.
That's exactly what it was.
A timpani, that was a double. What Emil did was, he was on the board of, whatever it's called at the union, and he went to New York, and he fought for us, the percussion players. He said, especially now that he's got all these new instruments from Harry Parch,
right, exactly.
An instrument called Trans Celeste, bass marimba, and stuff like that, and like even orchestra chimes, those weren't doubles for the percussionists. And Emil went to New York and argued, with them, the vibraphone, stuff like that. So Emil got us all kind of new doubles, because at the time it was just woodwind players that were getting all the doubles. Well, if I went on a call and I'm playing, drums, which happened a lot for me, and I had to run over and play timpani, I got a double. If I had to run over and play vibe, I got another double, and stuff like that. But then all of a sudden, Emil came on the scene, and, with all these new instruments he brought onto the scene, they all ended up being doubles. So Emil did a lot for the percussion section.
He did. I mean, there were guys like, Francisco Aguabea and, guys playing conga drums. So, bongos, timbales. To me, this was like, and then bathroom breaks. I mean, I think this is I think you were still in Connecticut, but I mean, percussionists did not get a break. And it was like, when Emil first got out there, it was like, okay, let's take 10 minutes, 15, whatever. And percussionists had to set up their next instrument to play, and Emil's like, we got to go to the bathroom too, and he fought for that too.
Right.
You know, it was really. But go back to the Lalo Emil story you were gonna talk about.
Yeah. So we were doing a session with Lalo. Now, Emil wasn't, the only thing outside of, his daily work and all that is, he played with Don Ellis before, but after all that ended, Emil wasn't playing any much jazz at all. He just was zeroing in on his percussion thing and rental stuff. And one day we were doing a session with Lalo, and when you're doing a movie call, you do the score, and then sometimes there's a nightclub scene, and in the scene there's a vibe player up on stage, piano, bass, and drums, and they're playing some soft jazz and stuff like that. So some of these movie scores, when the session is over with, they have to do what they call the source music. It's called source music.
Right.
So in this particular movie, there was Lalo asked Emil to stay, and they kept. I think Shelly was there. They kept the rhythm section, and they played some bebop. And Lalo kind of freaked over Emil's jazz chorus playing, and
so
everybody.
Cool, man.
When the session was over, I says, Emil, I said, would you believe what you just did? Man, that was beautiful. He really played his butt off. And I says, come on, man, let's start up our group again and start playing again. How can you sit home at night, when you should be out there playing the clubs, man, like everybody else. And sure enough, he got the bug. I got a phone call from him. He says, yeah, let's put the group together again. And so he called Dave Mackay, Chuck Delmonico and so on, and we started playing around town. And that's how it, that all started up again.
Roughly what year was that? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, that was, I would say that was in the very early 70s,
Mm-hmm.
Around, 70, 71. The clubs in Toluca Lake, these jazz clubs, Dante's, and people would come in, and that, hear us, and that helped my career too, because people came in and said, gee, I didn't know you played drums, man,
Dude, you're the best drummer I've ever, you're one of the best drummers I ever heard. Joe, we could go on for hours, man. We just went for an hour, and I just wanted to say, man, I love you and Emil forever. I certainly don't pretend to know you guys like I'm your best friend or anything, but at the same time, you guys have brought me so much peace in my life through your music, playing together, just leading by example and being great human beings. And I wish you all the health and happiness for the holidays and the new year. And let's get this together again pretty soon down the road. We'll do another part real soon, man. And but much love to you and your family.
Well, the same to you, man. Thanks. I'm glad to be of help.
Absolutely. Also, I just want to let you know I found a 10-inch record. Just to let it go. You hit me to this cat last time. I had no idea who he was, but I found this 10-inch on Capitol, Shelly Manne, and it's I can't remember who was on piano, but it was Boots Mazzulli and Max Bennett in the rhythm. And you hit me to Boots, lad, because you played with Boots, didn't you? Play with him?
Yeah, with Toshiko.
Exactly. And I'm a burn. This is like mid-50s. I was like, you're always there, Joe. So you're and Emil's looking down on us and smiling right now. So it's beautiful, man. Thank you.
Actually, Thank you, man. Have a great one.
Peace
Bye-bye.
out, Joe. Bye-bye. Just a legendary person and an amazing musician, Joe Porcaro. Remembering the another Titanic musician and tremendous player, Emil Richards. We'll be back momentarily with Jim Loveless on the Jake Feinberg Show.